Happy New Year's, Mets fans. For today's special New Year's Eve edition of Locked On Mets, I will be breaking down the things you can be most excited about heading into 2022 for your New York Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So on today's show, I'm going to break down the 3 things you should be most excited for in 2022. In the first segment, I want to talk about the players that are coming up, namely Mark Vientos. That is something you should be thrilled about in 2022, potentially seeing his debut. In the second segment, I'll talk about Starling Marte and the trickle-down effect he's going to have on the rest of the Mets lineup. And then lastly, of course, the thing you should be most looking forward to in 2022, Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom headlining your New York Mets starting rotation. Before we get to any of that, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So Mark Vientos debuting is one of the things you should be thrilled about in 2022. But along with that, it is just seeing another year of development for these exciting top prospects the Mets have right now between Vientos, Brett Baty, Francisco Alvarez, and Ronnie Mauricio. You have guys that are shooting through the Mets farm system that can impact this team in a big way. That could also be great trade chips to get you a lot of assets this week. We've talked a lot about Ronnie Mauricio as a trade chip. If he goes out next season, if he's not moved this offseason and is just tearing it up at the deadline, if you need to get a big player, suddenly that trade chip is that much more attractive. And I think one of the players that I'm really thrilled about, and we'll get to Vientos in a minute, it's also Matt Allan, because we have not really seen this guy pitch, and he is by far the Mets' highest upside pitching prospect they have. If there's one pitcher in their entire farm system right now that can be an ace one day, it's Matt Allan. And we, because of Tommy John, have not seen him really pitch very much at all since the Mets drafted him. So this will finally be a year where he'll get a full season. I'm sure the Mets are going to be very cautious about his innings and keeping him protected. But this will be a jumping off point where if he pitches great, and we'll see where he lands this year. I mean, I would imagine primarily in high A, but suddenly you'll have a pitcher that is on track starting next season to really make an impact in the near future. You're going to be able to have a pretty clear idea of what Matt Allan is and what his trajectory is moving forward. But that leads us to the prospect that really headlines this segment, which is Mark Vientos. And I've done a whole podcast, or I've done multiple podcasts about Vientos throughout this offseason. The most recent one where I was comparing him to Pete Alonso. And you could first look at that comparison and think that it's putting too much pressure on this player, but it's simply looking at the numbers and the comparative power and the fact that Vientos this past season had a better slugging percentage by a couple of points than Pete Alonso in 2018 before his rookie season, where he hit 36 home runs in his last year in the minors and was just a dominant offensive force leading into that rookie year, where, of course, won the home run derby, went to the All-Star game, set all those records, including the rookie home run record with the 53 home runs, and led the league in home runs. And I'm not saying that Vientos is going to do that. He would have to get that many plate appearances, that many opportunities. That might not be there for him on this team, but at some point in 2022, I think that he is going to have a pretty big impact here. And I still would not completely shut the door on him throughout spring training, getting a lot of opportunities to prove himself. And even if that doesn't mean breaking camp, getting enough playing time that you can really get the sense that he could be on his way in the near future. And when I right now look at all the prospects that could be playing for the New York Mets next season, this is the one that actually has a great chance. And when I think about all the different players on the roster and who can give you the most upside as a DH, Mark Vientos is the answer. So seeing him in 2022, that is something as we get into this new year that you can be really excited about because the Mets haven't delivered a position player like this since, oh yeah, Pete Alonso. But would it be great to have two of them, two 40 home run guys in your lineup? That's the potential you have with Mark Vientos, and that is just something I'm thrilled to watch this upcoming year. Along with that, though, we have the player that I pinpointed at the beginning of this offseason as the number one priority the Mets should be going after, Starling Marte. I'm going to tell you in a minute about why you should be so excited about the impact he's going to have and the trickle-down effect he'll have on the rest of the Mets lineup. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar, and that is Built Bar. It's filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat while being high in protein. So you get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. There's so many flavors to choose from, whether it's the raspberry bar, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, cookies and cream, which is my personal favorite, or peanut butter brownie. If you want to try all of them, get a mixed box. You can get a couple of each, see which ones you like best, and then order your favorites moving forward. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to built.com. Make sure you use the promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that is promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. Built.com. So heading into this offseason, the player I wanted the Mets to sign more than any other was Starling Marte. The reason being, I knew that Michael Conforto's days with the Mets were done. We knew that reunion wasn't going to happen. All the writing was on the wall. So you looked at the free agent class, and there wasn't a lot of great options. I was like, all right, well, if they get Mark Canha, it's not a bad Conforto replacement. It'd be solid, but you're certainly getting a player that doesn't have the upside of a Michael Conforto. And hey, the Mets ended up signing Mark Canha, but the thing about that signing is it didn't replace Conforto. It replaced Dominic Smith out in left field, essentially, because Starling Marte is the Michael Conforto replacement and the Michael Conforto upgrade. He just had a season. He stole 47 bases, which adds a dynamic that this ball club did not have. But on top of that, he brings you legitimate great defense out in center field to Mets go that way. Or if they want to keep Nimmo in center field, he'll be a great defender in right or left, wherever they want to put him. I would assume it's going to be center or right, but that is going to have a trickle-down effect on this roster. That outfield in general with Canha, Nimmo, and Marte is going to be such a huge upgrade defensively over what the Mets are running out there most of the time last year. That is just going to bring a whole different dynamic to the ball club. And then you add his speed atop the lineup with Nimmo, that makes things even more interesting because let's just say Marte is the leadoff hitter and he gets on first base, steals second with Nimmo up. Now you're in this interesting, position if you're a team where, yeah, maybe you walk Brandon Nimmo, but now you got two fast runners on base and you have Lindor coming up, you got Alonso. The pressure these two guys working off each other can put on any team atop the lineup where both of them are going to get on base at potentially 400 clips. I mean, it's going to be tough then to get through those first two batters just based on probability alone and get both those guys out. And that's going to lead to more opportunities for Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso with runners on base where they can thrive. They can get their RBIs when they hit a home run. Those home runs count more. You're putting up crooked numbers on the board. And that's going to be the real thing for the New York Mets is when you can start the game in the first inning with a 3-0 lead, you know how often you're going to win those games? I mean, the probability just skyrockets if you get a lead, and particularly get a lead with a crooked number early. That changes the entire outlook of a game, especially if you have a Max Scherzer or a Jacob deGrom on the mound as well. So all of these pieces do fit very well. When you throw in Eduardo Escobar, what does that mean to me? It means that, if he's batting fifth in the lineup and maybe Marte and Nimmo had gotten on, but Lindor and Alonso both struck out, you have another opportunity to cash in a 3-run homer because that's what Escobar does. He drives the baseball and hits a lot of long bombs. I look at this Mets lineup right now, and it really is just so deep top to bottom. I mean, I'm really wondering right now, where does Mark Canha even hit? I mean, let's just say there is a DH. Is Mark Canha the 9 hitter? Because you just want that on-base percentage at the bottom of your lineup? If it's not Canha to buy your lineup, who is? Are you just going based on the best hitters and James McCann's hitting down there? Are you going with another high on base guy? Now Jeff McNeil's a 9 hitter. I don't know how he's going to feel about that. This team is so loaded, and that addition to Starling Marte is the one that moves the needle more than any other, because what you got there is you got a potential all-star player. I mean, Mark Canha and Eduardo Escobar could be great. I doubt either of them is all-stars next year. But Starling Marte could be. And if he is, and you could potentially have other all-stars like Pete Alonso and Lindor on your roster, well, now you've got a core offensively that should be able to put up a lot of runs and finally get rid of that previous notion that you have to win all these tight games because you have a Mets team that just can't scratch those runs across this past season. So that's going to be so big. And I really think that the Mets have transformed throughout this offseason into a team that should be feared. And Starling Marte is a huge part of that. We've talked throughout this week, throughout previous weeks, and about different position players that can get thrown into the mix. And that certainly is still on the table. The Mets are being very aggressive this offseason. So you're still wise to think about the other possibilities. And maybe you can get one more big bat in the middle of that lineup, and that will just make things even more devastating for other teams. But as presently constructed right now, the Mets have a starting lineup that I think most teams would be envious of. And it started by getting those veteran pieces in Canha and Escobar. But when Starling Marte was signed, that was the piece for me that changed the entire outlook of the 2022 season. And then you follow it up with Max Scherzer, and it's pretty good to be a Mets fan right now heading into the new year. And that's what we're going to talk about in just a minute. The most exciting thing for 2022, the fact that you have Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer atop the Mets starting rotation. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as the football season continues to march towards the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. So head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using the promo code Locked On. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. So for those of you who listen to this show, a lot of times I'm going to throw a lot of stats and numbers at you. And today, haven't had a lot of that because it's more conjecture. We're dreaming of 2022. We're thinking about what you should be excited about coming into this new year. But I had one stat that I had to pull out because this one excited me. And that was actually when I was doing research on the German Marquez episode. I was looking at where he stacked up since 2017 when it came to F4. And it was just interesting that when it came to all of baseball, there was two pitchers with an identical F4 that was the best mark in baseball. Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer at 27.6. The best F4 in baseball. The Mets have both of them. The best two pitchers in baseball are on the same team. And if you round out that list, just to get an idea of how other pitchers stack up, you have Garrett Cole, who's been devastating since 2017, particularly with the Astros and now the Yankees. He has a 23.5 F4. You got Aaron Nola at 19.9. And interestingly enough, a pitcher who could still be on the Mets if not for Jeff Wilpon and the previous regime had Steve Cohen bought the team a couple of years sooner. Maybe Wheeler's still a Met, a top rotation with Scherzer and deGrom, but he's fifth on this list. Zach Wheeler, 18.3. That F4, I mean, obviously buoyed by a couple of incredible years with the Phillies so far, but those two good half seasons, huh? Brody, what do you think? Top 5 pitcher in baseball since 2017 that you let go because he parlayed those good half seasons into a whatever it was, $119 million contract. Might have that wrong. Regardless, let's talk about the 2022 Mets and forget about a former Met and look at what Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer is going to mean. I mean, can you just imagine that you're playing the Nationals, right? You open up a series on a Thursday, 4-game set, and Jacob deGrom is starting the first game. And that's Max Scherzer game 2. And now you start off a 4-game series and you're already up 2-0 in the series. You just got to win one of the next 2 games, you win the series. You go into any series and it could be like that. I mean, a 3-game set, you could have that series wrapped up, the first 14 innings. You go in the first game and DeGrom throws a gem. Game 2, the Mets hang 7, and Scherzer is working on a shutout through 5. And you're like, wow, we just won this series already. That is how fast it can happen, and the wins can pile up. The past season, when Jacob DeGrom was on the mound, the Mets won something like 75, 80% of the games. If you now multiply that by 2, and these guys make 60 starts, I mean, let's just do some quick math. I'm not great at math. This is why I got into writing. I used to be good at math when I was in like elementary school, but something happened when I got to high school and to college where it just faded for me. So let's just say 60 starts, you win 80% of those starts. That's 48 wins as a team for those two those two pitchers. Not them getting 48 wins, but the team winning 48 games when those guys are on the mound. I don't think that's even ridiculous to imagine that possibility for the other 3/5 of your rotation. I mean, that's pretty light lifting to get to a 95 win season. So that's what can happen there. That's what these two guys can do for you. And then if you really want to dream, if you really want to dream about what 2022 can mean for the New York Mets, just imagine you get into the playoffs. Hopefully you won the division and you start a series, and that's what you can open with. You can open with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer. And then let's just say you get to a fifth game in that series. Suddenly you got one of them pitching on full rest and the other one coming out of the bullpen. Like, the options are endless. And when you get to the postseason, having that elite starting pitching is what takes you to a completely different level. And it just doesn't get better than Jacob deGrom or Max Scherzer. And even if you want to talk about some less rosy scenarios, let's say Jacob deGrom's injuries continue to pop up. Well, suddenly the team does not get completely derailed. The season doesn't just end because you have an ace that can carry that burden. And the same thing goes the other way. If Scherzer goes out, DeGrom can carry that burden. And then, both of them are healthy. It's such a ridiculous luxury. And I think I've talked about this previously, but I also love the combating styles you have. Jacob deGrom, sort of Mr. Roboto. He's more of the artist, the perfect mechanics, comes out the simple man and just effortlessly pumps in 102 miles an hour, and it has that devastating slider and rarely cracks a smile or rarely shows his anger. And then you have this pit bull that is Mad Max Scherzer, who goes out there and is pacing around the mound and is yelling and grunting on each pitch and is asserting his dominance and really being this alpha personality on the mound, and having that combination. It's just going to be so much fun. And Citi Field is going to be just rocking. The one thing we know about Mets fans, you can have the player like a Yoenis Cespedes or a Pete Alonso, the position player, Mike Piazza, who transcends and that fans just adore. But what gets butts in the seats is pitching. This is a franchise that's always been built on great pitching. It's a franchise that Tom Seaver built. It's a franchise that had its heyday in the 80s where the doctor was just capturing the imagination of everyone as Doc Gooden was just so dominant with all the strikeouts and that remarkable rookie season, then the even better year in 85. And then you move over to other eras of Mets baseball. And once you got to this recent generation, it's been Jacob deGrom and I guess maybe Matt Harvey for a bit before that, Noah Syndergaard. It comes down to the pitchers. That's what people show up for. That's when Citi Field gets rocking, when you have that dominant pitcher on the mound. And the fact that the Mets have two of them, it's just going to bring so much excitement next season. And then just to piggyback off that a bit, I still believe in Carlos Carrasco as a pitcher that is going to really impress this year. And I think that is how we'll close today. Let me just rattle off all the players that are being doubted on that I think will have impressive seasons this year that are going to surprise some of their haters right now. And it's Lindor, and it is Carlos Carrasco and Jeff McNeil. Those are the three to me that had bad years last season that I don't expect to repeat those down performances. Carrasco, it was a season where he blew out his hammy in spring training. It wasn't really managed right throughout the year. He sort of rushes himself back, doesn't rehab properly, tries to rehab at the big league level, throwing a couple innings at a time at the start, and he never got into the flow this season. So this year, if he gets a normal spring training, I think that's going to make that a 1-2-3 punch at the top of that rotation. That's going to be the best in baseball, honestly. And you have to be thrilled about that. Anyway, though, that will be all for this year on Locked On Mets. Thank you so much for all of you who have tuned in and listened on the podcast feed. Thank you for all the people who have picked up the show on YouTube over the last couple of months. I love what I do. I love breaking down the New York Mets. And I'm looking forward to a 2022 that's going to be just huge on all fronts for this team, for this fan base. It's just going to be so much fun. And I'm looking forward to being on this journey with all of you every day with Locked On Mets. As always, as I just mentioned, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicap expert Lee Starling. Locked On Bets is where you should go for your daily gambling needs. You can follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.